Well, there is in the meeting invite, there is a Slido as well, so I can do some questions at the end. So if anyone's got any questions, let me know. Cool. All right. All right. If everyone can see the screen, we will kick off if that's okay. Cool. Yeah, I'll share the slides afterwards as well. As I say, I've got multiple things on my screens. If there is anything in the chat, anyone needs any help, may not see it. But yeah, so session's recording. Everyone's muted. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. There's a Slido if people want to ask questions at the end. So yeah, I'll kick off then if that's all right. It's not quite the auditorium, but hopefully everyone's comfortable. Feels weird talking to myself in a small room, but it's good. It's current circumstances. Thank you everyone for joining. Given up an hour. So I actually said about 132 times last time I did this talk, so I'm going to try and consciously not say quite so much. It's kind of my filler word. Say it again. So this is a talk entitled Measuring Agile Success. It will talk a lot around strategy and linking that to the work that we do in teams, and we'll talk a lot around measurement and behavior. Some of these things we may be doing already. I think we're certainly making good steps. Some of the things we may not have done. And it also talks about linking our strategy as a business to the work that we do and how we make decisions and how we prioritize. And we've probably got some improvements to make, as we always have. So I'd be really interested in, based on this content, are there things that we think we can do right now, and how do we make those changes as a group to improve what we do and the value that we deliver for our customers. So yeah, a lot about measurement and value and customer, hopefully, in these slides. So back to the screen. So I'm going to talk a little bit around vanity metrics, leadership, strategy, and something called the balanced scorecard. So I'll just work through an example of where I've previously applied techniques to bring strategy closer to the decisions that are made in teams. I'll talk a little bit around teams and some of the tactical things you can do day to day. And I'll also mention leading and lagging measures. Some of these things we've done in the teams, some of the things we've done in IT and with Deloitte. We have used some of these words already, but hopefully this just reaffirms some of the things that we already understand. So for me, just to start with, we talk a lot around agile, agility, digital. It's all a way of trying to make us more efficient, more effective, trying to make us a successful workplace. So we want people to come to work, understand the purpose of what they're doing, carry out some activity in an efficient way that they know is valuable, it's meaningful. And also we've got this sense of continuous improvement. So nothing's ever perfect, we can always get better, but we're encouraged to get to talk about continuously improving what we do and how we do it. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." I will talk a lot in here around purpose, autonomy, really understanding the reasons why we're doing the things we're doing day to day, why it's important, who's the customer, what's the value we're trying to generate. One thing just to kick off with was league tables. So I didn't perform particularly well at school. A number of reasons for that, but didn't really enjoy school, didn't really enjoy the national curriculum. And I find it quite interesting that the way that we measure people at school, the way that we measure success, the way that we set people up to sit an exam, and then success or failure is dependent on that score in that exam. It's not always, being slightly unfair, but it's not always how to practically apply what you're learning. You are learning to pass an exam. It's a little bit like a driving test. I think you get through a driving test, but I think a lot of instructors will say the first year or two when you're in a car on your own, that's when you really learn. It's how you're applying what you've learned, how you're applying the theory. So the way that we have these league tables in schools, the way we set up the national curriculum, we do encourage with, and a lot of teachers have spoken around the behaviours that you encourage, the way that we teach things. It's not always going to set people up the best for life. And on the left, there's a lady called Maria Montessori. On the right, a gentleman called Ricardo Semler. Jeff Bezos and Larry Page are two examples of, they call them the Montessori Mafia, but two examples of people that have been through Maria Montessori's schooling, which was much more geared at the student being empowered to think about what they want to learn and how they want to learn it. So they would build a bicycle, and the idea was that you'd reinforce some of the theory behind science and mathematics, So thinking about circumference and torque and other things, you reinforce those things based on the practicality of building the bike. So you're setting people up practically in life. You're also reinforcing the theory. So again, a lot of this happens in business. You know, the way that we measure success is sometimes quite theoretical, and it's not sometimes setting us up to work the most effectively in our team. So yeah, just something to consider. And I just find the national curriculum an interesting example for this. So Eli Goldratt once said, "Tell me how you measure me, and I'll tell you how I behave." There's a very strong link between measurement and behavior. So when we are setting measures for success for our business, for our teams, we have to be conscious of how that's impacting people's behavior. And I'll come on to a few more examples of that later on. The culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior leaders willing to tolerate. So again, measures change, behaviors change. We talk a lot around culture. So we have to be consciously, again, aware of how are the measures that we've got of success of our business and the behaviors that we're seeing in our teams. How is that affecting our culture? And we do have to be brave enough to have some of those conversations around people's behavior in teams. It's a good book called Lean Analytics, which looks at the measurement towards goals. It talks around what makes a good metric, a clear understanding of what that metric is. It needs to be comparable. It's ideally a ratio, and it's behavior changing. So again, it's for us all to be empowered whenever we talk about how success is being measured. How are we going to know this is successful? Whether that's down at the feature level, whether it's up at the strategy level, we're all empowered to challenge, well, what does that measure actually mean? What's that delivering for the customer, and how do we perceive that as a team? Agility as well. I think one of the things that was quite appealing when I joined VWFS was that we talked around agility as a journey. And I think there's far too many companies out there that think Agile is a transformation, and you're not very agile at the moment. You go through a series of projects and programs and you deliver those, and then you're agile. And that's really not the case. I think a lot of this is a little bit softer. It's culture, it's mindset. There is this understanding that, as Christian talks around, we're in quite an uncertain world now. We never really did have, but we certainly now don't have certainty that if we do activities A, B, and C, we get result D. And so we're all working collaboratively together to try and reach an outcome to deliver value for our customers. And part of doing that, we have to look at the way that we work, the way we work together, the processes we follow, the tools that we use. So this is all open for discussion because it's all about continuous improvement. But yeah, it's not agile 0% to fully agile 100%. This is an ongoing journey that we're on to get better, to better meet the needs of our customers, and to really look at some of the things that are constraining us. So vanity metrics. So the ability to monitor something that we're measuring as meaning success, and to be able to reflect on that information and to make changes. And I think far too often we have these vanity metrics that we use in businesses that maybe from a marketing or sales perspective are quite good to attract customers sometimes, some of our corporate customers, but for us internally, not necessarily supporting us improving and knowing that we're really doing the right things for customers. I've got quite a strong retail background, and we would always sit in trading meetings on a Monday and we would talk about revenue and profit, top line growth, the number of page views, the number of outages that we had, how many hits per second on a server. That's okay, but it wasn't really inferring whether we were meeting the needs of our customers, whether we were delivering value in the most effective way. So it was really starting to understand what some of those numbers were meaning. I think, again, more broadly, looking at budgets and stage gates and headcount reduction, scope, deadlines, timesheets, call time. We've got all these different measures in all of our different teams, and are they really enabling us to make good decisions and to understand if we're delivering value for customers, and what behavior? It's not that any of these measures are particularly bad. Again, it's just understanding what behavior is it driving in our teams. If we need to see a headcount reduction, is it just, I've unfortunately been in environments before where it was thought that it was fair. We told every department you had to lose 3 people. Now, that might be fair, but from a customer and business perspective, is that the optimal, most effective thing to do? So this is all around thinking about measurement strategically as a company, and are the numbers that we're looking at day to day enabling us to make decisions to get better? So every number we have, every number we look at, Is it valuable to us? Again, it's alignment to goals. So quite often we'll start with a KPI and that's what we'll track. And we have no idea the objective or the goal that is trying to help us reach. When I come on to talk about the balanced scorecard, there was probably more conversation around what the objective was, so that was clear before we started talking about the KPI. That was often the easier bit. We knew the measure that we had, but actually what did that mean to us and how was that enabling better decision making? So one example, something we termed RegGate. So a previous company I worked at, we had a number of product teams, very similar to our setup at the moment. So we'd gone from very much technology being sat on one side of the floor and the business being sat on the other, to much more cross-functional product teams focused on different parts of the customer journey. And again, a very significant, a very positive step for the organization. But we had this particular piece of work where one of our product teams that was responsible for getting people onto the site and converting them to a registered customer, they set themselves a measure of increasing conversion by 10%. So there was quite a lot of customers that were coming onto the site, didn't see the value or the benefit in registering and just left. And there was quite a lot of money that we were then spending on marketing to attract them back. So what can we do in that initial interaction that improves conversion? Again, relatively straightforward. The teams were empowered, their own roadmap, their own product owner, they were empowered to make changes to that product. The team, again, very familiar with Eric Ries, Lean Startup, hypothesizing, experimenting, the kind of Lean UX. So we thought from a methodology perspective, theoretically, the teams were set up for success. We've done a lot of coaching with them. And so the teams went off, they did some research with customers, they did some prototyping, they had a minimum viable product that they launched with a small subset of customers. And that conversion rate actually went up by more than 10%. So that they then rolled that change out over a number of days to all of the customers. And essentially what was done was there was a change in the technology. So the experience was quicker and more stable and more seamless for customers. It's more aesthetically pleasing. It was closely aligned to the brand. Also, they'd removed some fields. So the registration form at that point was something like 20 fields. And I think a lot of people didn't see the value in providing certain pieces of information. So often people would get to halfway through the form and we'd see them exit. That's because we were asking for date of birth and things like that. And we weren't making it clear why that information was valuable to us and valuable for us to have on their behalf to then make their experience better. So we removed those fields. It was light for everybody. Conversion rates were up. We were capturing more customers. They were registering on our site. A positive thing for our marketing team because our email marketing database was bigger. We were just starting to take on Salesforce and Pardot. So again, lots of positivity, a real buzz around the floor. Pat on the back because we'd set up a product team. They were autonomous. They were delivering value to customers. Absolutely tremendous. We had a few beers down the pub. The team went out for lunch. A real celebration. It wasn't until probably 3 or 4 weeks later on that there was a normal Monday morning meeting where our board of directors would sit down. There was we called it a dashboard. It was about 8 pages and had about 50 or to 60 KPIs on it. But essentially, our board sat down with their normal pack on a Monday morning, looked at all of the data, and there were a number of things that were red. And a real concern from our sales team that the sales leads and the sales conversions that we were seeing had significantly dropped. Now, after a bit of investigation, we had a number of analysts look at the data across the departments and the products for that week. It transpired that it was really important to us as a business that we had a rich data set. So a data set of customers that, so essentially that we would acquire customers onto the site, and then the company made money by selling access to that. So it was a job seeking website. So people looking for jobs and recruiters who had those jobs available. So recruiters would pay for access to the job seeker database. So the value for our company was in that job seeker database, but it was in the richness of that data. So by reducing the number of fields, the amount of data that we collected when people registered, and drip feeding that information over time, so that from a job seeker perspective, the experience was amazing because I could register really quickly with just an email address and a password. And when I did provide information, I knew exactly why that information was important. But that may take a number of weeks and a number of months. because you didn't necessarily apply for a job straight away. You didn't get feedback straight away. So the journey was several months. From our sales department's perspective, all they've seen is that we used to have 1.2 million candidates in our database with a data set of this level of richness, and they've seen that level of richness drop. And so some of the searches that recruiters are performing on lots of different facets within that data set, they were only seeing now 10 results where they would have previously seen 100. So from their perspective, well, what's happened to your database? You've got less candidates. And it's just because the richness of that data had decreased. And so it left us all a little bit puzzled, because on the one side, we've got a product team that's celebrating because they've reached their goals. And on the other side, you've got a business saying, well, the way that we actually make money, we're actually not making as much money this month, because what we actually sell, the perceived quality of that has dropped. So it's a really interesting realization for us to say, who is our customer and what is value? Because then it became, well, are the job seekers just collateral? They're not actually our customer. Is the recruiter actually our customer? Do we have two different customers, very different personas? So just stimulated some really interesting conversations at board level around what our strategy actually was and who our customer actually was, and how we'd gone from success in one area to failure in another, really just based on the fact that our measures and our outcomes weren't aligned. We weren't aware of how we were both measuring success in those different departments. So that's, again, quite an interesting example of how measures can be used in different areas of the business, and success can mean very different things, and those two things can impact each other inadvertently. I think, again, we're quite lucky. We are in even given the crisis that the world's in at the moment, we are in a very forward-thinking, very strong business, and hopefully an industry that will recover relatively quickly. Again, my background being quite retail and aviation focused, you're often coming from a burning platform there. Now, for us, it's also interesting because the burning platform is a story of a guy on an oil rig who wakes up in the middle of the night, completely on his own. Here's an explosion, and the whole rig's on fire, and he has to make this decision around whether he stays to put out the fire or he jumps into the sea below, and he decides to jump. And for him, it was that the risk of certain death versus the risk of probable death. And it's sometimes this analogy is used in business, because often when we start talking about agile ways of working, and focus on value and focus on customer, we're in a place where the platform is already on fire. And that puts us in a place where we're making decisions through panic, as opposed to making strategic decisions that will be better in the longer term. I actually think we're in a relatively strong position here. We're probably on the other side where, we've got Christian, who's spearheading a lot of the things we're talking about. I think for some in the business, at the moment anyway, they may not be completely with us, because we have got, as I say, a strong business. We have got happy customers. So I think it's just making sure we're completely clear objectively what we're doing, who our customer is, what the value is we're trying to derive, and objectively when we talk about ways of working improvements, why are we doing that? What does it mean? And that's something we should all be questioning, to make sure that we are clear that today we're doing things in a certain way, and this is how we're measuring success. And we've made some changes, and are we better or not? And in the same way, when we make changes to our products and services for our customers, and sometimes those changes may not be positive, it's probably going to be the same for some of the things we do internally. We're going to try changing the way that we set teams up, the way that we work together. Sometimes that's going to be positive, and sometimes that's going to be negative. So as long as we've got some of these measures and we understand the importance of why, then let's understand that we're experimenting. So that's the burning platform. Also, quite interestingly, when you take on new ways of working and new frameworks, in particular, Scrum will talk around servant leadership. We've got intent-based leadership. There's a number of popular leadership styles that are aimed at making sure that teams feel, empowered and sometimes autonomous over the work that they're doing. Now, that's not to say that management is bad, but I think in all of our teams now, it's interesting for us to reflect. Previously, in a project environment, it would be my role as the manager to decide who was on that project and how long they were on that project for and what they were doing. And now we're in a world where potentially the product teams are delivering outcomes aligned to the strategy, and that's not my role anymore. So I think we're all going through a bit of a journey on what does management mean in a product-led agile environment, and what does leadership mean? And again, there's no black and white, right and wrong answer with this. I think it's just understanding that we're all on a journey, and we're all feeling certain things at times that I'm not completely sure now what my role is here. And I think, as Christian's talked about a number of times, it's not to say that you're now not required. It's just that we're all going through a process of adapting. So actually what I was doing yesterday may not be appropriate for tomorrow. So, and that being okay. And for us all to talk about that, because we are evolving the way that we work together and we're all learning. So yeah, management and leadership, not black and white. We're all learning, and a completely different topic that could have its own talk, but another interesting area. But again, I think what we're after is, this workplace where everyone's contributing to their full capacity. We're encouraging people to be healthier, happier, having more control over their work. And that's very true. We want people to come to work to be happy, to understand what they're contributing, understand the value, and understand the customer. There's a book written by Dan Pink called Drive. He's spoken around the differences between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Some really interesting work. I encourage you all. There's a number of YouTube videos, but I encourage you to read his book. He did some research around certain tasks in modern business, and if you just paid people more, did you get better performance from them, better output? And I think what he started to notice was that when you got into more knowledge-based work, where it wasn't certain that you were going to be able to deliver a certain thing, meet a certain outcome, then actually by paying people more, you constrained them, they became stressed and actually performed worse. So he was starting to think a little bit around the extrinsic motivators. I sometimes need to be a little bit of a given. I have a salary that I'm paid that's fair. I have career opportunities. I feel safe. And then balancing that with the intrinsic as well, when these intrinsic motivators of purpose, autonomy, and mastery. So I think a lot of the things that I'll talk about sometimes seem a lot softer, but ideally, if we're linking what we're doing to strategy, if we're being objective, if we have defined outcomes, then we understand our purpose. We understand the purpose of what we're doing. If we are able to make decisions in our team that affect the work that we're doing and how we do that work, then hopefully we feel like we're becoming more autonomous. And if we're now, almost taking it as a bit of a given that you come to work, you have your purpose, you have autonomy, and you can do your best work, then it becomes more about mastery. So how is Volkswagen Financial Services supporting me to be better in my role, to be better in my broader career, so that when some of us do leave Volkswagen Financial Services, we can look back and say, hey, what an amazing company. It supported me to get better. I was very clear on who my customer was. I did some of my best work. That's really what I think we're after, is you can look back and smile. We'll all move on from time to time for other opportunities, other experiences, but while we're here, really making sure that we're getting better in the roles that we're doing. So trust. So for trust to emerge, to facilitate self-organizing, autonomous and successful teams. So I think a gentleman called Henrik Nieberg, who's done some great YouTube videos on the work he did at Spotify, he talks a lot around alignment and autonomy. And so sometimes it's dangerous if you just say to a group of people, you're autonomous now, make all your own decisions. If that's not completely aligned to the strategic intent of the business, then there will be sentiment that I don't know what they're doing and I don't know whether it's valuable or not. And I think that trust has to emerge, that the strategy is clear, and if it isn't, we need to say so. And the objectives that we're setting and the outcomes that we have are aligned to that strategic intent. If we can trust that that's happening, and hopefully a lot of the work we've been doing with Deloitte and we'll keep doing, is to reinforce the fact that the outcomes that we're working on are aligned to the strategic intent of the organization, the measures are clear, and we know that we're delivering better value for our customers. But if that's not clear to us, then we need to say, and we need to make sure that that thread is there, because this is where trust comes from. Because again, back to that story with registration, when it's good and the company's performing well and we're delivering value, then that's great. When it's not so good, then if we don't have this thread and we don't know what teams are doing, then trust starts to be challenged. So yeah, if we're not clear what we're doing is aligned to the strategy, if we're not clear how we're measuring what we're doing and the value of it to customers, then we need to say so. So a little bit around how we actually visualize strategy and how we do actually measure performance, because I talk a lot around strategy. So to introduce the balanced scorecard. So this is a strategy map. The balanced scorecard, I'll just go through this relatively quickly. If anyone's interested in the balanced scorecard, I can talk about this for days, so please let me know afterwards. The balanced scorecard has 4 of these perspectives. So it uses the word balanced because what it's trying to do it's encouraged when we talk about strategic intent, when we talk about objectives, to make sure that we are thinking across those different perspectives. Depending on the organization you're in, sometimes it will feel like all we ever talk about is financial measures. Or, when I worked for EasyJet, they were unbelievably customer obsessed, unbelievable. And so everything we ever talked about actually was purely about customer. It wasn't about internal process or the happiness of colleagues. It wasn't around financial performance necessarily. It was at the corporate level, but it was all customer obsessed. And so I think by looking at the objectives across these different perspectives, you do understand a little bit more around your business. We'll criticize companies sometimes like Ryanair because they don't seem to care too much for customers. But I would hope, in Ryanair's perspective, they've looked at this and said, given our strategy at the moment, then we are looking at our internal process and we're looking at finance. Actually, learning and development and customer for us at the moment is not of strategic importance. So it's just about having this view across the perspectives, and then importantly, how these things link together, because you may not feel you're completely delivering value against all of these objectives, but essentially if you're in the learning and development department and you're trying to ensure collaboration and knowledge sharing through communities of practice, then that's going to link to the development of new products and services, because we're better empowered in teams based on that knowledge to make good decisions around the new products and services that we bring to market. Hopefully bringing those new products and services to market in an agile way and being able to iterate and come up with minimum viable products and prototypes, then we're going to improve client satisfaction. And that in turn will improve our brand perception, because we're bringing great products to market. Customers are happy, they feel engaged and involved in that development. And we're going to grow revenue through those new services, which will increase shareholder value. So it's hopefully the fact to show that these things are all intrinsically linked. So Peter Drucker once said, you can't manage what you cannot measure. I think one of the things we thought about in the past was taking that up a level to, you cannot measure what you cannot describe. As I say, in the past, we've become very obsessed with, we've got a dashboards and we're full of KPIs and we need to focus on a smaller set of those KPIs. It's to get back to a point where whatever measure you've got, you understand the objective that represents. So why are these certain measures and numbers that we talk about all the time, objectively, why are they important to us? So when we think about strategy, it's really important to align to clear objectives, to measure the performance against those objectives, and to focus on fewer, clearer, more strategic metrics. So, we're the same as any business. I think it's actually been to our strength, I think, in the current environment, given the number of different facets we have to our business. So whether we're talking about commercial vehicles or or fleet, there's so many different commercial vehicles, there's so many different aspects to our business. That's a strength. I think from a strategic perspective, it's also then being clear that we have a very small subset of measures, a small subset of strategic objectives for that particular year, that particular quarter, that we can focus on. I think, again, in a lot of businesses, there's a lot of measures, there's a lot of objectives, there's a lot of initiatives. And in all of this, it's about understanding what's the most important and how we prioritize. So this is a book by Kaplan and Norton. This has been around since late 80s, early 90s. I'm a massive fan of the balanced scorecard as an approach to help you understand your strategic intent and then link to the work going on in teams. So I'd be more than happy to talk about this in more detail. But essentially, it's greater alignment between work that individuals and teams are doing and the strategic intent of the business. So the previous application of the balanced scorecard was surveying people in teams and surveying our senior leadership and trying to understand whether we felt that the work that was going on in teams day to day was actually aligned to the strategy. And actually, in this particular organization, 9 of the 11 members of our leadership team felt that it wasn't. So again, lots of great work going on in our teams, very close relationship with our customers, but a very loose coupling with the actual strategic intent of the business. 10 of the 11 members felt that, again, that success was due to our ability to react. So very, very good in a crisis situation at just executing. But when we actually stepped back after the crisis and thought about our strategic direction, was there good alignment from the strategy down to our teams? And we felt there wasn't. So, but again, 8 of the 11 felt, based on their experience in other companies, we were exactly the same. So this is tricky stuff. How you make sure that a strategy is clear, a vision is clear, and everybody gets it to the extent where they can go back to their teams and make good decisions aligned to that strategy. This stuff is tough, and it's ever evolving. So an approach for this is, objectively understand what we're doing as a business, understand the measures of success that are linked to those strategic objectives, start to talk around outcomes and targets per quarter. I think we're doing some good work in that area at the moment, but always room to improve. Linking back up to our strategic initiatives. Portfolio management is again a key part of this. We're going to have in all of our areas, we're going to have a number of different initiatives, a number of different outcomes, and we're going to have to prioritize, and we're going to have to understand dependency. Again, I think we're making some good steps in this area. Skills mapping, again, another topic for another discussion. I think we're starting to talk more about strategic workforce planning. Again, another really important area to understand where are we going as a company, to understand where we're going from a technology perspective, and then to understand, right, we've got some really engaged, really talented people. Actually, where do we need to make our investments in technology and in people? What skills do we need to learn? Again, something else brilliantly that Christian talks around a lot is how we need to evolve and change and learn in the future. But I think strategic workforce planning is going to be is supporting that conversation. Actually, given the industry, given the movement of technology, where are we going? And actually, if we're taking on a new technology and it has its own language, then do people need to learn that? And how do we support that internally and externally through learning and development? So a lot of these kind of things are very interrelated. Strategy being clear, objectives being clear, technology direction, target operating models being clear, so that we can all say, I love working here. I can see where we're going. I can see an area over here that's developing. I'd love to be involved. How does my career path lead me there? So I think some really, really exciting stuff for us to look at. Just another example of this. So these strategy maps and how they can be quite visually quite important. Again, an example of an airline. So trying to make sure how our objectives are all linked and the metrics against those objectives. So again, it's making sure that people know, if you're part of the crew and you're trying to turn around an aircraft, often when you work for companies like EasyJet, there's a big obsession with turnaround time and on-time performance. Now, part of that is customer experience, because if I board an aircraft at a certain time, I have a certain expectation when we're going to take off. Some people will get anxious if we're on the plane for too long, on the ground for too long. The crew have things to prepare. But part of that turnaround is also how you work with partners. So the ground crews and refilling the aircraft, emptying the waste, replenishing sandwiches, all those things are quite interrelated. But it's making sure that ultimately, from a profitability of the company, turnaround time is important, on-time performance is important, because we don't want fines from the airport. If you're on stand for too long, you can be fined. We want to make sure that the aircraft is leaving on time so we don't lose our slots. So all of these things are very related, and it's making it clear to people that if I'm training new crew on some of the activities that support the aircraft being made ready to take off again, I understand why that's important strategically as a business. And that is absolutely supporting the profitability of the company. Again, in some teams, the work that I do, I can't immediately see the thread that says, I've been to a meeting, I've done some work, and I know that's going to make £10 for the company because the customer's going to do these things. But as best we can, it's trying to make sure we've got this thread through the strategy. Another example is exercise. So I always use exercise as a good example of leading and lagging measures. So if someone says, I want to lose weight, and if we then change some things and we get back on the scales at the end of the week, then we may have lost weight, or we may not have lost weight. Sometimes you'll feel as if you've done some good things and you've got on the scales at the end of the week and you've put on a couple of pounds, and then you feel terrible. So exercise for me is a good example of thinking about why do you want to lose weight? Are you trying to live forever? Do you want to win a marathon? Is it to lose weight? Are you getting fit? And it's then to think about what are the measures, the leading measures that we can put in place that we can start to experiment with every week, so that we know at least we've consciously done some activity. So week 1 might be, I'm going to reduce my calorie intake. Week 2 might be more specific around carbohydrates. It then might be certain exercises that we do. So actually, if 1 week we do lots of cardio or high intensity work and it hasn't worked for us, again, exercise is a good example because everybody's body's different. So you can't necessarily go online, do a Joe Wicks workout, follow a plan, and guarantee, everyone's seen the adverts, guaranteed to get abs in 10 weeks. That isn't true. But the 6-pack of your dreams, all these things, because everybody's different. So again, exercise is that great example because it's important to know why we're doing it from a motivation point of view. Again, I've talked about, particularly with running, I find it really difficult because I'm so bored. So at certain points, it's good to know, what are my leading measures for the exercise? why am I doing that exercise, and how do I know when I get to the end of the week, it's going to be more likely that I have lost some weight because I've been trying some very specific leading measures of success. One second, my clicker's gone. So yeah, I think it's the measurement, and then it's the behavior that we're creating. So again, exercise, that good example. It's okay, you know, we're going to consciously try some things. Our lagging measure is the weight. So if that hasn't changed positively, then what new leading measures can we have? What new approaches can we take? And again, bringing that back to our work. Yes, we might be working on something that's going to take 6 months. The ultimate lagging measure might be profit, money, sales, revenue. But what are the things we're doing as a team every week that give us this sense of, are we making good steps or not? Are we achieving things we wanted to achieve? So when we talk about outcomes and we talk about leading measures, sometimes that's very difficult. Leading measures are really, really difficult to come up with. And when we do come up with them, they may be negatively telling us that we're going in the wrong direction, but that's kind of the point. So, you know, again, leading measures is something else that we need to experiment with, and we need to figure out whether they are taking us in the right direction. So I've talked a lot around strategy. I think when to achieve the strategic, you master the tactical. So I just want to talk around some of the things we can do day to day. Obviously, strategy is extremely important, but what we're doing day to day. So I've been in some teams where we talk a lot around productivity, and we start talking around how much we're doing. I think now more than ever, particularly working from home. You know, when I used to be a developer, it was very much how complex what I'd written was. How many classes I've created, how many relationships I've created. That was just fictitious. When I was a business analyst, if my spec was less than 50 pages, I was disappointed. You know, bigger meant more complex, meant I'd done more work. Again, you know, simplicity is something we're aiming for now, which is great. So it's just thinking about some of the measures that we have. Are we tracking the right things, and are we creating the right behavior? In a Scrum environment, when we talk about velocity, and we talk about productivity, you know, we can't help ourselves. You know, if you've got team A that's doing 100 points every sprint, and you've got team B that's doing 10, then what's wrong with team B? And we just have to be considerate to behavior, because if team B starts giving estimates that are 10 times bigger, then suddenly the velocity is the same. But the team's not necessarily any more productive, and it's not necessarily meeting the value of the customer or meeting its outcomes. So again, we need to be very conscious around the measures that we have in our teams and the behavior that they create. And does it tell us whether we're getting better or not, and whether we're meeting the needs of our customers? Again, from a Kanban perspective, this is a community flow diagram. Again, it's a very useful tool. I'm not knocking its use. It encourages us to think about levels of work in process and the throughput, the flow through the team. And that's a very positive thing, but that won't tell you whether customers are satisfied. So again, we can get software out more quickly. We can get hopeful value out to customers more quickly, but it is that feedback mechanism, that customer satisfaction, which is the reason why we're doing it. So we have to talk about some of these measures together. Yes, throughput's increased. Yes, the team are happier, absolutely important. Are our customers satisfied? So talking about those three things together. Distractions, so another thing day to day. I've worked in a lot of teams where, so I was talking to Priya around a few different topics around how people collaborate. I think Pomodoro is one of the bits and bytes, and how we encourage people to focus. And I think when we talk a lot around cross-functional teams and collaboration, for someone like myself, I'm naturally quite introverted. I am not comfortable being in a group of people for 8 hours a day. I don't want to necessarily be on screen in a big group for a long time. I like my own time to focus, and it is very much a balance. Absolutely understand that, but I think again in teams, when we use things like flags or headphones on to mean leave me alone, let me focus. Pomodoro is an interesting one, because I've again worked in teams where the developer doesn't take their headphones off because they don't want to be bothered. They want to focus, they want to get on. But what that has meant is that they haven't been involved in those collaborative conversations, and they've needed help and perhaps haven't felt they could ask for it. So with all these things, all these techniques, all these tactics, it's understanding why we're doing them and whether we know they're adding benefit. If people feel they're being distracted a lot and they need to focus, let's try something. But we have to incorporate everybody's needs and just make sure that it's encouraging good behavior in ourselves and in our teams. So we talked a little bit around leading and lagging, the behaviors that we're creating. Another interesting area that we talked around was how we, and we're talking about that at Volkswagen Financial Services as well, how we enable career paths for people that aren't just becoming a line manager. Now, it's not going to naturally be an area where everybody excels. Some people really want to be a people manager. Others love being a specialist. They love being close to the detail. They want to be more of a mentor to those around them. And it's giving the flexibility for that to happen. And one really interesting area that we talked around in development of people was, we had this measure of the average rating for our specialists that were talking at conferences. So whether that was software development or business analysis or user experience, actually our people going to conferences and speaking and sharing what they're learning with the wider industry, and it's then that kind of average rating. So that feedback of how did you do, how could you get better in the way that you present and the content that you presented. But there was also side benefits of people were coming to us. So people were saying, I've seen one of your developers speak at a conference, really interested in how you work, that the culture that you have, can I please join? And I think that's probably one of the things we'd hope for as well. I think again, we've talked around the work from anywhere, the flexible working. It means that for us as a brand, for us as a culture, we can reach many more people in the UK and beyond. So I think for us, it is how we show the culture that we have, and having some measures in place that show that we're improving, that are a little bit outside the norm, to really show that we're interacting with the industry and we're bringing people in, and that are great talent, and we're helping them to flourish. That's leading and lagging. As I say, the leading metrics are hard. I think we've started to talk about them more in the context of outcomes, for some of the product development and projects that we're doing. These leading metrics are hard, and they differ depending on the team and depending on the product. And so we just have to keep talking about them. We're going to try a leading measure. So for example, that one seemed crazy, but when we're recruiting people, we were interested in how they'd heard about the company. And if it was from meetups or conferences, then that was one measure for us. It's just thinking about what can give us this sense that we are getting better culturally, from a process perspective, and from a customer perspective. We're going to have to experiment with these things. Some will stick, some will be good across the whole company, some will be very specific to the team and the product. So I've talked a lot around some of the things we shouldn't measure. What should we measure? And how often are we reaching our goals? How often are we meeting outcomes? Again, another one to think around. If we're hitting our outcomes every time, are those outcomes stretching us enough? That's a really good question. But again, having a goal in your team, having that goal aligned to an outcome, thinking about how often we're reaching those goals, as opposed to just hitting milestones that are set on our project plans. Return on capital employed, so and return on investment, how efficiently are we spending money that we're investing? Another interesting one, as opposed to just whether we're just spending the budget that we have. Sustainable pace and improvement. I think a sustainable pace is a really important one. The work we've been doing, the teams have been doing on areas like buy now, pay later. I think some great work in a crisis environment, but whether the pace of that is sustainable. So we have to get to a place where we're doing great work, we're delivering valuable, it's sustainable, but we're also talking about continuously improving and getting more efficient, more effective. Cross-skilling, so to T-shape. Again, T-shape is maybe something we've not talked about a lot, but understanding that we've got specialists in all areas, that's great. We want people to get better in their role. The T-shape is very much around, just because person A is on holiday, we can't do anything. We want to get to a place where we're a cross-functional team. We have empathy with each other. We understand what each other does, and we can help out and we can support. So trying to get to this place where cross-skilling is happening, it's encouraged. People are given the time to learn new things. Culture hacks. Now again, with Christian, really encouraging some of the culture hack things we can do. The open door. There's loads of things we can do, and it's for all of us to try. All of us to try. Again, in the past, there's things like fail walls that get talked about, but again, as a team, how much are we talking about what went well, what didn't? I think naturally in some of the Scrum teams, we do that with retrospectives, but it's for us all to do in all of our groups. Think about what's happened in the past, how we can improve, but just culture hacks more generally. Let's just try things around our ways of working. It's not for me or anybody else to dictate, this is exactly how we're going to work together. This is exactly the processes we have to follow. We can give guidance, but this is for us to all experiment, hypothesize, and share. In our team, we've tried these things. We're happier, we're more effective. Share it. Let's see if that's something we can try across the teams and across the departments. Team happiness, inclusion, safety. Again, we're measuring some of those things, but really, really important. And time to market, time to value. So Again, we'll talk a lot around how long it takes for us to create a feature, but how long does it take for the idea to actually get to market and deliver value for our customers? So again, it's thinking around the broader end-to-end and the broader value stream, and at what point we actually take measurement. So to measure is to know. If you can't measure it, you cannot improve it. So again, the importance of these measures, objectively understanding why we have these measures, and then seeing whether we're getting better or not. I reference Spotify quite a lot, but this is an example of a Spotify health check. But again, it's around us talking and collaborating about how we get better. Spotify gives some very good areas. It can monitor trends, but the power is in the conversation. How well does a particular group of people feel that they're supported by the wider organization? How do we feel about the tools and technology that we use? Do we think that we're learning and getting better? Just some really brave, important conversations for all teams to have. And then for that to be shared with leadership around how leadership can support. Just to briefly mention innovation, lots of ideas. Ideas is often the easy bit. We've got lots of ideas across the business, but again, it's making sure we can quickly get investment. We're monitoring really the learning rate. So I think when we talk about outcomes and how often we meet outcomes, it's also interesting. It's not seen as a negative thing. You know, we've tried 10 things this month, and that being the important thing. We want some of them to be successful, obviously, but I think it's far too often still we'll come up with a list of projects, and that's the really hard bit, getting them approved, and then it's just off into delivery. But really, talking about uncertainty, we've got to expect that a certain number of our outcomes, a certain number of things that we try, won't be successful, however we were determining success. So again, it's that kind of throughput of learning, things we're trying and whether they're successful or not. And again, we need to monitor why those things weren't successful. But again, I think it's that idea that we're going to try something and it might not work. We just need to make sure that that's happening quite quickly, so we're not investing lots of time and money. So going agile, often a phrase used. You know, we're looking to create the foundation, framework, culture, vision, such that an individual, a team, a department, an organization can react to change and make empowered decisions. This is really what we want. We want to empower a group of people to really understand the organization and their customer and deliver value. And I think we need to then make sure that people can make decisions, because there's nothing more frustrating than knowing what we should do and not being able, or not feeling like you're able to do that. So a lot around autonomy and empowerment. But for me, aligning strategy and making measures clear is all aiming at trying to make sure that people are aligned to strategy and able to make decisions quickly. So yeah, these signals, these leading measures, making sure that we're getting an idea that we're going in the right direction. So back to Eli Goldratt, tell me how you'll measure me and I'll tell you how I behave. I think that's more important than ever. So in all of our teams, all of our departments, what are we measuring as success, and what impact is that having on how we behave and how our teams behave? It's something to consider. And even more so, do we have any measures of success? And is that written down objectively, or is it just a number? I think that is that. I'll send the slides out. There's a few things I've talked about around the balanced scorecard, lean analytics, lean startup, and there's a great TED talk from Ricardo Semler on some of the things I talked about, the national curriculum and trying to change the way that we educate children to make it more practical. And again, I think it's a big movement in the Netherlands around trying to empower children to work in more of a Scrum way, to talk around what they're going to learn that week and what they're going to do first. So again, a completely different world. Not the teacher at the front telling students what they're going to learn, even from a very young age, encouraging the students to have more control over what they want to learn and how they want to learn it. So yeah, I think even in school now, it's the way that we're encouraging everybody to work collaboratively and cross-functionally. So yeah, that is me. There is a Slido link, which I'll just get up. Okay. So yeah, a question at the top from Rob. What about measuring success for individuals versus success for the team? And what are the implications for HR? Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that we are exploring and will explore with HR. Absolutely right. We talk around long-lived teams and product teams and alignment to strategy. So yeah, if we are very much in a place where I'm in a team and I'm a specialist in my team, and the work that my team is doing, we decide based on the strategy. then how do I get better individually? And I think that's the conversation we're having now. And I think the BOM and the IT exec are fantastic. They absolutely get this. And we are talking around management and leadership. And yeah, I think it's something we're going to have to explore. We do have some processes working with headquarters that don't completely suit some of these things, and we're just going to have to work with them and around them in the short term. But again, with communities of practice, we want more communities of practice. We want people to feel more empowered to talk about their career and what competencies they want to improve. We want to give people time to learn. Again, very important topic. Rob and others, if people want to talk more specifically about some of the things we could do, I'll be really, really interested. So that's Rob. Your skin looks so good for your age. What's your secret? Oh, blimey. Bit personal, that one. But yeah, my skin looks so good. What's my secret? It's this stuff. I mean, I don't know why that one's putting there. Blimey. Bulldog, good product. Everyone should get Bulldog. There is sensitive moisturizer and protective moisturizer. Be careful you get the right one. What's your take on velocity? Conscious of time, so I'll just go through a few of these. If people want to pick up with me, I'll let me know. What's your take on velocity? The key purpose is to measure predictability and pace of a team. It does not show if we're delivering value to the customer. Yeah, absolutely. Velocity is a team's measure. It's not for anybody else. It can indicate whether a team needs support, but it's for the team to use. And again, it's not to compare teams. That's exactly right. The team should be looking at the value they're delivering for customers, and that's the thing that we expose. Velocity is a team thing. It's for teams to talk about internally about how they can get better. Yeah, absolutely wouldn't want to compare people on velocity. What are our current measures in teams? Do we have any visibility of those? Again, yeah, I think that's one of the points. I think I'm obviously closer to some of the product teams and projects. And so I think with the ways of working stuff, I think it's us looking at what are the more generic measures that we have across the teams and how we know we're getting better. Some of the minute are quite specific. Velocity is probably one of them. Yeah, so yeah, how well you think we're doing in sharing? I think, yeah, I think you're right. I think it's how we get more transparent at things that are not working. I think that's one thing I take on. So I talked there about a fail wall. It's probably something to think about, particularly working remotely. Was it fudge up nights we've had before? I think I've not been involved in one of those, but yeah, maybe it's trying something like a fudge up night again, just to share some of the things that have gone well and some things that haven't. So that's that one. What would your recommendations be for teams, colleagues to start moving towards the way of working? Talk through where to start. I think the best place to start in your groups is really just to start talking about how we do our work day to day. So whichever team you're in, again, I appreciate some teams have retrospectives set up anyway. If you don't, then set one up in the community that you're in, at least monthly, and just to talk about how we do the work. I think we don't do that enough. We get in the day to day, we get far too much into the detail of the work itself, and we don't talk about how we do the work. But I think with Andy as head of ways of working, I think that's definitely a statement of intent that we want to focus on it. We think we can get better, and it's something that we want enterprise wide. But it starts with us talking as teams around the fact that we are empowered to make changes to how we work. Years and years ago, you'd join a company, you'd do some internal training courses, a boot camp for a couple of weeks, and you'd be given a book, and that is how we work. And there was pages and pages on everything, all the way through from feasibility through to in-life production support. We're not really in that place anymore. We do have some frameworks that can guide us. We do obviously have some compliance and controls to think about, being financial services, but a lot of this is up for grabs. It's about being happy and productive and aligned to strategy. So it starts with having a conversation with your group around how we can get better, and then trying something, not being afraid to try something, however small. If something takes me an hour at the moment and it's not valuable, stop it. And if it takes an hour at the moment and it is, can it take 50 minutes next week? So small improvement. It's probably the 4 metrics. The 4 metrics on the balance scorecard aren't always the same. The perspectives normally are, but I've seen some companies change them. So if, depending on the organization and the industry, they've either been renamed or changed if internal learning isn't important, but it should be. But yeah, those 4 perspectives are normally the ones used, and then you define objectives in them. Again, all with the intent of making sure that we've got measures across customer, internal development, finance. Cool. That's all the main ones that have been voted on. All right. Yeah, I'll end it there now if that's okay. If anyone's got any specific questions, I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. Let's have a look. Yeah, and I'll probably just finish with that. I always finish with this. So Banag, that's bang out of order, that is. Okay, can have that one. There you go. I've enriched everyone's lives. Cool. All right. So yeah, that was me. Thank you very much for the questions, and thank you very much for your time. And yeah, if anyone wants to pick up anything I've talked about with me afterwards, then please do. But yeah, thank you very much for your time. I'll see you all again soon. Thank you.